Quiet week for the New York Jets. Thanks for tuning in to the Flight Plan podcast. Tim McMaster here, along with Zack Rosenblatt. We are going to get into the aftermath because obviously it's been a couple of days since Robert Saleh was fired, but we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about Jeff Ulbrich taking over. The news today that Todd Downing will indeed be the play caller going forward, and we have some reaction from the locker room as well that Zack collected today. Before we get into all of that, though, we do need to start here, Zack. We knew that you were going to cover this game, Jets Vikings, in London, and that you were going to take a few days. We even talked about it on the podcast, but we've known for a while. You're going to take a couple of days, go to Paris, enjoy some time. And we joked, I think, that like, oh, well, that's when
Davante
Reddick will report. And then that joke became, oh, that's when they'll trade for Davante Adams when you're in Paris. But lo and behold, neither of those things happened. Instead, the Jets fired their head coach with you in Paris. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, the thumbnail for the episode is Zack in Paris with the Eiffel Tower in the background on his phone. And yes, he is actually working on the story in the streets of Paris. How'd that go for you?
Oh my God. It still doesn't even feel like it happened. It was such a whirlwind, just to give the full background. So, when you're overseas, your service plan is a little different. So you have up to a certain amount of data that you use before you have to start paying a certain amount or whatever, at least for Verizon. And so I'd have my phone on airplane mode throughout the day when there wasn't Wi-Fi, just to unplug a little bit. I just kind of happened that day, and maybe it was the universe, shoving me in that direction. We were walking around the area where there's shops and stuff. I was in the Nike store, and I happened to have my phone on, and the Adam Schefter tweet comes through. I'm separate from Samantha at that moment. I'm looking at the men's section, and as she comes up, I'm sitting down. I'm clearly stressed. She comes up, and she's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Robert Saleh just got fired," and we've been together long enough that she understands that I have to go into work mode at that point. And so at first we're just sitting there, and then we decide, we're going to go back to the hotel. We have plans for that night. We had this river cruise thing along the river in Paris. I had to go back to the hotel room. I banged out a story real quick. I was making calls. I was texting. I was, reporting and talking to Diana, who wrote the story with me. Turned the story in, and we walked to the river cruise, and I'm still getting text messages. That's the photo you have of me by the Eiffel Tower. We're literally walking over to the river cruise, and I told Samantha, we need to stop for a sec. I need to respond to these messages. There's so much going on. I'm so flustered. And she captured that photo, which thankfully now I'm going to have in my records because it's pretty cool.
By the way, I showed the photo to Mandy, my wife, and her reaction was, "It's a good thing he already proposed." And she said,
"Yeah, totally. Yeah, we talked about this. Samantha said that too. I proposed to her back in July. In her head, I was going to do it when we were in London or Paris. And she said earlier that, a little bit before you said it, she's like, imagine if you had planned to propose to me today, because it probably would have been that day because of the timing. But yeah, anyway, so I get to the river cruise. I'm completely distracted the entire time, just on my phone, talking to this person, what this means, what's the next step.
Sounds very romantic.
Yeah, very romantic. Luckily she handled it great. She didn't get mad at me at all. I kept saying, I'm sorry. Got through that. The restaurant we wanted to go to for dinner, they didn't have any, spots available till 10 p.m. So we went to a different spot. We wound up still not even eating dinner until 9:45. But then it wound up being amazing dinner. Wound up relaxing. It was all good. But yeah, it was just, and while we're at dinner, I'm listening to I'm looking at the Woody Johnson tweets from his conference call because I wasn't able to get on it. I'm trying to, listen to the players that spoke that day. And this is all while I'm trying to have this romantic vacation with my fiance. But, it's just a moment in Jets history, not my travel, but this happening is a moment in Jets history. I don't think anybody saw coming. With how bad it got these last two games, and you and I talked about, I believe we talked about it, I believe in the last episode or the one before, it being in London and against Sam Darnold, London, which is so meaningful to Woody Johnson, where he was the ambassador, for the U.S. In Trump's presidency, and he had all his friends out there, and he likely went there with high expectations, and they go and they put out a real big stinker, and he was embarrassed by that. in my head, I thought if they were going to fire Robert Saleh in season, I'm like, okay, maybe if they get blown out, that 3 of their next 4 games are on national television, which is crazy. The first Monday night against the Bills this week, Sunday night against the Steelers the week after that, and then 2 weeks after that, Thursday night against the Texans. If they got embarrassed on national TV in one of those situations, like I think maybe that's where I thought, or bye week or something like that. But Woody clearly decided, you know, he wanted to do it now instead of waiting, because if we did it too late, then the season could be lost. And so he decided to try and find a spark for the team. Yeah, but I did not expect to get that alert this week, and it still kind of it's surreal. I'm sure for the players, obviously for Robert, for Ulbrich, but like the fact that I'm just not covering Saleh anymore in the middle of the season, like it's just not something I've never experienced an in-season firing before. I covered Joe Judge, as things got really bad. It seemed like he was safe the entire year until he had a meltdown at the end of the year. I covered Doug Peterson right after the one of the Super Bowl, so he obviously wasn't going to get fired. Like we all knew Robert Saleh was on the hot seat, but week 5, like 2-3 record, like it's not like they're 1-4, like 2-3, and they probably, you could argue they could or should have won a couple of other games. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't throw a pick 6, they're at least in it for that Viking.
Yeah, they could be 4-1 extremely easily.
Yeah. And if Greg Zuerlein makes a 50-yard field goal, which he's made, over and over again the last couple of years, then they win the Broncos game, like, or at least they have a chance of winning it. So it was a interesting, rash decision. I think it's fair to criticize Woody for the decision while also understanding why he did it. And, I thought Robert Saleh had a lot to prove as a coach coming into the season. I don't think he answered any of those questions through 5 games. And you could argue he deserved more time or more rope, but he handed the keys to Nathaniel Hackett because he wanted to get Aaron Rodgers, and he let Nathaniel Hackett hold on to those keys, even if he was about to, which we're going to get into, the reporting, and I've heard this now in the aftermath, like confirmed, he was planning on demoting Hackett and promoting Downing. I don't know if that was going to happen this week or in the near future or what, but that was his plan. And then he gets fired, and that's why there's all the speculation about Aaron Rodgers being the one who did it. But ultimately, Downing is the OC now, as people who are watching this know. And so, Robert wanted to make a change, but he wanted to make it a little too late. The offense looked like it has. They were making all the same mistakes they've always done. The discipline looked poor, penalties, all this stuff. There's been a lot of talk of accountability. Like that's been the word of the week. I'm writing something for today about that. It's all about accountability. And, you have guys like Sauce Gardner being like, we're millionaires. We have that clip coming. I'll let it play. But Aaron Rodgers said, like, if I play better last week, then this doesn't happen. Just guys like pointing the finger at themselves, and maybe the way everybody's saying we need to be more accountable implies that everybody was not being that before. I think Ulbrich is going to be somebody that has the ability to hold them accountable. Not saying Saleh didn't, but Ulbrich's a little different. It's a little different because this is a guy who played for 10 years in the NFL and had a really good career with the San Francisco 49ers. He's highly respected by players, coaches, and the like around the league. He has a lot of friends. He said he talked to Raheem Morris, Dan Quinn, and Matt LaFleur. I believe he's close with all of them. He coached with Raheem Morris in Atlanta when Raheem Morris became interim coach midseason when Dan Quinn was fired. So everybody respects him in this building, and we've been very high on him on this podcast. I wrote that story about him last year. Like I thought he is made of head coaching material. This isn't the most ideal situation, but it never is going to be an ideal situation in the end. Like he might never have gotten the opportunity. So
yeah, and I was going to say it's a good situation in that a lot of times when you get your first head coaching job, it's on a bad team, right? Because like the previous coach got fired, team had a terrible season, and maybe it's a roster that doesn't have that much talent. Yeah, it's not great taking over week 5, week into week 6, but he does have a talented roster that already knows him and respects him. So it is a chance to, if not prove himself and win this job permanently, like put a good showing forward, and then that he was already going to be a candidate this off season. Like it only goes to help him there. So I feel like it can't go like, and if the season goes off the rails, he could just say it was already going off the rails. Right. Like, so I agree. It's not an ideal situation, but there's definitely worse situations. Jeff Howe had a story today from getting voices from around the league about this, and the general consensus was, I think, shock. And like you said, rash decision by Woody, and a lot of people not understanding like how you can fire a coach when if they win the game on Monday, they're in first place. There's all that different stuff. But there was shock within the locker room as well, as you mentioned, and you teased this a little bit, but here's Sauce Gardner from today.
I was shocked, you know what I'm saying? The reality is we're 2-3. Everything is still in front of us, you know, so I was really shocked, you know, and you know, because Saleh was extremely close since the day that the Jets first drafted me, you know, and to be honest, like, he changed my life. Like, where I come from, all the stuff that I've been through growing up in Detroit, and for him to be able to, like, take a chance on me, that's why for his birthday I text him, and every year I always say, like, I appreciate you for taking a chance on me. You know what I'm saying? And he really changed my life. He really changed my family's life, and like, that was always the goal for me in life. And he made that happen. So, you know, I was, like I said, I was shocked because the things that happens is like the penalty. Offense not doing good, defense not doing good, special teams not doing good. From outside looking in, people can say it's his fault, but, like, realistically, we are grown men that get paid millions of dollars. We should be able to be held accountable. We should be able to correct ourselves and the mistakes that we make. You know what I'm saying? And, yeah, it definitely threw me off, you know.
Threw him off, threw a lot of people off. All right, let's get into Jeff Ulbrich, the head coach. We talked about it. You said you wrote a story about how he's kind of ready for this moment. But through 1 week or less than a week, a few days of being in this moment, he had a press conference today. He talked, obviously, on the day when he took over. What has the aura been around this team with Jeff Ulbrich, head coach?
You know, I think it's still too early. This was their first practice today. I think he'll be able to inject some energy into the proceedings because everybody likes him in that building, and he comes with a lot of energy. He has a Dan Campbell-esque, like, you know, aura to him, I would say. And, you know, there's, you know, Sauce Gardner gave a fun anecdote where he said at every team meeting, he would come up and dap up Sauce, Quinton Williams, and whoever else they all usually sit next to, and he would sit on the stairs like next to them and watch Robert Saleh make his comments. And he said the biggest thing everybody keeps saying is he hasn't changed. So he's still dapped up those guys, same as he always does, except this time he walked to the front of the room and spoke to the team. So, you know, before practice, he's going around to every single person, shaking their hand, has a handshake with some of the defensive guys. He's made it a point where he said, like, I'm looking forward to, like, getting more time with the offensive guys, while also saying, you know, he's going to be calling the defense. So I think his amount of input and involvement in the offense won't be, like, significant, but I think he's going to try and get his hands in that pie and see how everything is going over there and get involved the way he has to. And he'll make the big decisions like every head coach does, like, you know, the going forward on fourth down stuff, you know, whatever it is. But yeah, you know, I think everybody's optimistic about him. Everybody's talked about how he deserves a chance to be a head coach, and now he gets to be their head coach. And, you know, he's preaching the right stuff. I think he aced his first press conference, which doesn't mean anything ultimately. Robert Saleh aced his introductory press conference, and guys have, whereas Adam Gase failed his, and it wound up being a bad tenure anyway. But, you know, those things are overrated, but I think he's saying all the right things, talking about accountability, saying what we've done, the product we've been putting on the field isn't good enough. You know, I asked him about all the penalties and how he can fix that. And he said they're inexcusable and unacceptable. And, you know, we're fine with some of the penalties that happen when, you know, it's from being aggressive, but it's the pre-snap stuff that we don't, which is the same thing Saleh said. But, you know, he's saying all the right stuff. We're about to find out what that means. If this team looks prepared on Monday night, you know, this is a tough week. So maybe, you know, you have to give them a little bit of room to breathe in terms of like how they look immediately. You would hope they don't get blown out or anything.
You do, but what you wouldn't imagine
they don't
that
have
Woody
time.
will.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. You're right. And it's on Monday Night Football, which doesn't help. But, you know, in the coming weeks, you just want to see a team that looks more prepared, starts from the very beginning of the game with the same energy that they have the rest of it. And so, you know, it's all wait and see. I think everybody in the building is optimistic, but, you know, you're optimistic until you get punched in the mouth. So if they go out on Monday and the Bills whoop their butt, like, it's going to be very interesting to see how this locker room and this team responds to it. A lot of changes happened in the last few days. You know, Woody made it clear that, you know, anything less than winning and making the playoffs is not good enough. And, Now you have a coaching staff that, Jeff Ulbrich has a chance, I think, if they make the playoffs, he absolutely will get a shot at keeping this job. But, you have to think the rest of that staff in the back of their mind, like, obviously they're focused on trying to win right now because of that possibility. But you also have to consider, like, these guys all know they might be looking for new jobs this offseason. So that's why, the fact that it's happened this early in the season is so unique. So, I think it's pretty unprecedented. I can't think of a time where a coach for performance really, like John Gruden was fired fairly early in the season when that happened, but that was because of, he wasn't fired. I think he resigned actually. And that was because of a scandal related to like emails and stuff like that. And then they rallied and made the playoffs. And that's like the only time that's really happened, I think, with an interim coach. Antonio Pierce rallied the Raiders a little bit last year. They didn't make the playoffs. He got hired. So yeah, it's really, really early in the season. That's why everybody keeps saying we have the whole year in front of us. And yeah, I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see how they respond and how Jeff responds if things go poorly on Monday night.
And I think one concern, well, you tell me if it's a concern or not. Obviously, we'll get to the changes on the offensive side, but you said Ulbrich probably still making the defensive calls. That's not easy. Like, he's got a lot more to worry about. And we've seen offensive head coaches who are used to being play callers give up that around the NFL, right? It's very rare nowadays that an offensive head coach still actually calls the plays. So is there a chance here that this defense takes a step back because Ulbrich's not spending as much time there?
It's a good question. I think they do have a really good staff of position coaches that can handle a bigger workload if that's what needs to happen, whether it's game planning or whatever it is. I still do. I think Ulbrich is going to be calling the plays. He's going to be doing the game plan. He's going to have his hands in the defensive pie more than anything. You trust Brant Boyer to handle everything on special teams. I don't think you need to worry about that. The offense is a concern that, you're transitioning to a new offensive coordinator in the middle of the season. How much can you change play calling and a scheme and tendency? I mean, maybe tendencies is the main thing you can change, but like, how much can you do that in the middle of the season? Like, how many weeks is it going to be before we see a Todd Downing offense? Like, Ulbrich's going to have to help usher that along. And so it's going to be, that this is going to be the balance he has to find. This is what it takes to be a head coach. This is the ultimate throw him into the fire, whether he winds up being the Jets coach or this is an audition for him to be a coach somewhere else. Like, he has to show that he can handle it. So you have Tony Oden, you have Aaron White-Cotton in particular. Those are two guys that are very highly respected, and I imagine they'll take on maybe bigger roles. And they have the talent on defense still. They have the coaching. So I still don't think they'll take a step back, but I think it's a fair question whether, Ulbrich can handle not only focusing on the defense and how the defense looks when it's not him running it, because he's run it since 2021. Robert Saleh didn't. Robert Saleh was the overseer, and it was his defense that he installed, and he absolutely deserves credit for a lot of development they've done with some of these guys. But he handed the keys to all of his coordinators, and Jeff Ulbrich was the most rousing success of those.
Yeah, he was the big winner there. All right, so we mentioned Downing. He's going to be calling the plays from now on. Really, the track record isn't amazing. He's done this 3 times, 2017 with the Raiders, 21 and 22 with the Titans. Those offenses ranked 23rd, 15th, and 28th in the league, I believe. But we got some more sound from today about that move. Let's start with Ulbrich talking about the shift to Todd Downing.
Yeah, I've always had a ton of respect for Todd. Schematically, like, I'm always looking at a guy like that as that's a small piece of the puzzle for me. It really is the style of play, which that group, what do they embody? Like the casual fan that's watching the game, what do they walk away saying about that offense? And for every Tennessee offense that I ever went against when Todd was the play caller there, they were tough, they were ruthless, they finished, they ran the ball, they played on their terms, and there's definitely a style that appealed to me.
We can get into those words and what that means for this Jets offense going forward, but I want to play Rodgers also from today about these moves.
Aaron, what's your reaction to obviously Jeff's move to strip?
Yeah, I mean, I knew there'd be changes after they let Robert go. Had conversations with Brick over the 2 days. I knew that he was thinking about it, leaning toward it, and I told him I'd back him up whatever he decided.
You talk about your relationship with Todd Downing.
Yeah, it's a great relationship. I love Todd. Todd's a great dude. It's been fun in the room. Been a phenomenal quarterback coach.
told him that many times. It's deliberate drills. He brings the right mindset to the room. He helps out the young guys really well too. Gives a voice to me and Tyrod in the room, and it's been a really good working relationship.
Let's go back to Ulbrich first. And he talked about Downing's offenses in Tennessee, like talking about a defense, right? Hard nosed, grind it out, like run it down your throat, aggressive, which is true. Derrick Henry was all those things for those teams. And, Mike Vrabel had that same kind of personality in Tennessee. It's really what those teams were when they were successful. But what does that tell us about? You said you can't change the playbook right now, but you can change which way you lean as far as the offense. This team said from day one they wanted to be a run first team, right?
Yeah.
So is now the opportunity to really do that, coming off a game where they were incapable of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you look Downing's, and I know people are down on Keith Carter, but he's the run game coordinator, and he was there in Tennessee as well. And I know you could point to Derrick Henry and say this is the biggest reason, and it probably is, but they had really good red zone offenses, and they had really good running games.
Gold zone.
It's no longer the gold zone. I think we can retire
right.
that officially. It wasn't the gold zone while he was here, really, because they rarely got into it or scored from it. But I think if I'm going to say like what's going to be the biggest differences, there's two that come to my mind. It's number one, it's running the ball better. I mean, that starts up front, and the run blocking has been awful, so they need to change something up there. I don't know what's going on. It's been really, really. Morgan Moses is coming back. We haven't talked about injuries yet, but he's likely going to play.
Let's sprinkle them in. So if you,
exactly, yeah. I mean, it works.
Moses
that way.
will be back.
And Rodgers is fine. He's limited, but he's fine. But yeah, Moses is going to play on Sunday, which is I think huge because I think Olu has struggled a little bit, understandably. His first game is playing right tackle of his career. But yeah, the running game is going to be the biggest difference. Like I think you're going to see them really emphasize the run more. And maybe Braylon Allen gets a bigger role because, he's has the look of like a younger. I'm not saying he's Derrick Henry, but he has the look of him and the way he plays. And then the other thing is the pre-snap motion, which they've gotten away from really over the last 2 weeks. And it looked like they were starting to motion more when, especially in that Patriots game. Over the last couple of years, they've been one of the teams that has motioned the least. This year, they were starting to move up, and then they were the last 2 weeks just not motioning at all. And that's kind of the way you scheme guys open. Like that's how it happens in the NFL. You throw the defense off balance. You see what looks they're showing when you move them around. And so, you hope that Downing is going to do that. I think in 20, he was the Titans offensive coordinator in 21 and 22. I believe in 21, at least, they were one of the most motion heavy teams in the league. So you want to see more of that. I know Aaron doesn't love pre-snap motion. That was kind of an issue he had with LaFleur. And it seems that as time goes on, LaFleur has aged really, really well because Hackett has been a disaster, obviously, and Rodgers' offense, and this is his offense. He's running it. That was the whole thing. Has not looked very good or very creative or surprising. You've seen it on a national scale a lot. Chase Daniel from Scoop City, he's been very critical of the Jets' offense, both there and on TV. Dan Orlovsky, like a lot of these guys who really know what they're talking about, have basically been pointing to the play calling as the biggest issue. So, I'm not ready to say Todd Downing is like the next Sean McVay and they're going to be the best offense in the league. I think he definitely left something to be desired to a degree when he was a play caller in Tennessee and in Oakland, I should say. But I called for him to be the OC last year. I think he's an upgrade, obviously, over arguably the worst play caller in the NFL. And so the theory is it can't get much worse, and I think it should get better. But the key is going to be how the Todd and Aaron Rodgers relationship works, how much those guys are in sync, and how much leeway Todd gives Aaron to do what he wants, and how much it's Todd saying, let's call this play. Like, I'm very fascinated to see how the offense looks. Aaron, you watch the games on TV, so I don't see this as well as you do a lot of times, but like he reacts, he's very like reactive when he's upset or annoyed. I think the big thing last week, he was doing this to get them to get the play call in quicker with Hackett. And so we're going to find out pretty quickly how this operation looks. Maybe it won't be perfect this week, but it kind of needs to be close to perfect because this team, you have an impatient owner. You need to get going. So.
Yeah. And you have a story up on The Athletic today, I think, about what basically this is what Ulbrich needs to get done as head coach. And right at the top, get Rodgers on track, which a lot of that obviously does fall on Downing. I think running the ball effectively would go a long way in getting the offense on track. And Rodgers, because throwing it 54 times like he did in London just means he gets hit 20 times. Like throwing it 25 times, there's less opportunity to get hit. He stays on his feet. If you're running the ball successfully, they have to respect all the reasons that we all know as football fans, like running the ball can help with the passing game. I think all that goes a long way. The other thing, obviously, the elephant in the room still is Davante Adams. Current asking price sounds like it's too high. The second rounder plus the whole although the contract gets lower every week, right? Like every time that a trade doesn't happen, Davante Adams costs about $1 million less for the team that's trading for him, right? Other than there's the future of that deal. But they're playing the Bills, who have also been rumored. Is there a world where like the winner of this game gets Davante Adams next week?
Oh man, I like that.
Well, you can trade him anywhere, right? We have talked that Adams has a long say in this because of the contract and the fact that there needs to be some sort of renegotiation. But if the Jets are 2-4, I don't know. I don't think he's coming to New York.
Yeah,
it's the place.
The fact that it's
Stephon Diggs doesn't look too good.
I mean, based on our luck lately, it wouldn't shock me if we get off this pod and they make the trade like tonight or tomorrow or something. But
you're not going on a trip next week, are you?
No, I mean, I'm going to Pittsburgh, but that's for work.
That doesn't.
It's interesting. If it doesn't happen before this game, then I think the results of this game at least might dictate whether the Jets are willing to even go get him, and what happens with that. But the Bills, I think, would make so much sense because they don't have like a number one receiver right now. I get the vibe that they're not willing to give up what the Raiders want for him. And I think that's the same for the Jets to a different degree. I think the Bills are probably want to pay even less than the Jets do, which is all a factor in this. I think ultimately it's probably going to come down to the Jets, Saints, and maybe the Steelers, if I had to guess, and the Bills kind of lingering out there. But the longer this goes, the less money it's necessarily going to cost Davante because each game check with each patching week. But as you mentioned, like if they lose this game, you have another tough game against one of the best defenses, the Steelers, Patriots on the road, Texans at home. Like it's a really hard stretch. So you need to both win these games, and then if you were to trade for Davante, also figure out how to incorporate him into the offense and all that stuff, which is a little more complicated now that it's not Hackett. I think Downing is probably better at incorporating a new piece. I would be more confident in that, but this isn't. Davante has a relationship with Hackett, and Hackett's not the play caller anymore. So there's like a lot of factors here to consider. I do still think the Jets are in the driver's seat if they want to go and pursue him, and if Woody is willing to pay that money. He kept saying how this is the best, most talented team he's had in his career as an owner, and so it sounds like someone who wants to be all in. And if you're all in, I absolutely think they should go and get Davante. As we talked about, it doesn't fix all their problems, but it does just add another weapon. And so I'm not ready to say I think he's going to be a Jet, but I still do think it's a really good possibility as long as they don't get blown out on Monday. If they do, all of a sudden things change a little bit.
I think the last thing in your story is Haason Reddick, and Woody put out the request, like, come on down. It's funny that Woody's the one who could actually make that happen by giving Reddick money. Like,
I wouldn't have said that quote if I was him. Trying to be nice here, but I just that didn't really help the situation necessarily. Like,
no,
everybody knows the reason why he's not here. It's not a matter of like
it wasn't Robert Saleh.
It's not a matter of all they've been saying is how when he gets here, we're going to hug him and welcome with open arms. Like that's not new. So what he wants is money, and he wants it now. He doesn't want it later, and so that's why I'm at this point. It's pretty clear he's not going to be a Jet unless he just changed his mind one day. So there's been no indication he's going to do that. He is tanking his value around the league. I don't think anybody respects how he's handled this. It's become such. I mean, the Jets they've topped it ever since he started his holdout, which was insane from the beginning. And now it's gotten more insane, but now it's just like, oh yeah, that insane thing is just in the background. Now that the Jets did this other insane thing and they're trying to get Davante Adams and this and this and this and this. So,
yeah, he's like 4th or 5th on the,
which is crazy because it's legitimately, I mean, Woody even said it. I've never seen anything in my entire time as an owner like this. It's the weirdest holdout ever. And it feels like I was talking about this today with somebody in the locker room. His locker's there. There's Reddick 7. None of his stuff's in it. There's like Jet stuff. But it's just so funny, man. There's lockers just lingering there for a guy who might never, wear.
Should like take a picture of it every weekend.
We're not allowed to take
I know
pictures
you're
of
not
the
allowed
lockers,
to,
unfortunately. But I mean, not unfortunately. There's a lot of talk about that stuff right now. But
Yeah.
that's how it goes.
It is crazy. Of $10 million now, he's never going to make up the money he's lost. Like,
I mean,
this is a lose situation for Reddick in a long.
Who's going to pay him the money what's the most he's going to get a free agent if the Jets let him leave as a free agent, which they can hold him hostage?
I mean, his agents have to have told him all of this, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's just going against.
It's not his agents at this point. I think everybody. I think people who are the most ardent haters of Tory Dandy, who's his agent, I think they even can understand it's not his agent telling him to do this. It's just not. And so let's play it out. Let's say they don't trade him, which maybe they might try to. I don't know. But let's say they don't trade him. They let him become a free agent in the offseason. They release his rights. Who is going to sign a 31-year-old defensive end who hasn't played in over a year? Nobody knows if he's in football shape. He's demanded $25 million. He seems like maybe he's not the best teammate. Who's going to give him this $25 million year contract you're looking for? Nobody. The most he would get with what he's making now, and I don't know that he's going to get that. What he's going to get is a 1-year prove-it deal, which is what he got for 3 straight years because he's a guy that was bouncing around the league. So clearly there was a reason for that. So,
and now it
started out, it's like everybody's making fun of the Jets for it, but I think it's become pretty clear that maybe this is more on the player. And, obviously we're not going to have the same discussion we've had the whole time. Like, they traded for a guy who wanted more money and didn't give him more money. And then he was upset that he didn't get more money. So that's the whole conversation. But yeah, I just don't see him being a Jet. You hope Noel McDonald keep playing the way he is, but you need the rest of the guys to keep it up. Michael Clemens had a better game last week, but other than that, you don't really trust Clemens. You don't trust Tack McKinley, Eric Watts, Brady McGregor. I don't know if there's somebody out there they can go and get, but Reddick would help a lot. It would be great to have him, but I just don't see it. Unless Ulbrich is because everybody loves him so much, if he can call Reddick and sway him or something, then that would be an impressive feat for him as he pursues this head coaching job. But
they don't have any history, right? There's no connection.
None. So the crazy part is not really almost anybody who's even played with Haason in the locker room. I don't think there is, which is kind of wild because he's bounced around the league a bit. So, it's just another crazy Jets thing. When we write the story of the season, it somehow is going to be even crazier than last year was.
All right, Bills Monday night. Let's get to it's a must win. It's a game where the Jets win. They're in first place. We said that. This Bills team that looked like legit Super Bowl contender through 3 weeks has gone hard the other direction. 35-10 loss to the Ravens. Allen in that game was 16-29 for 180 yards. And then last week, the Texans game, Allen, I just can't get over these numbers for Josh Allen last week. 9 for 30, 131 yards, and a touchdown. The only thing I'll say, he isn't throwing interceptions, but I'd rather have Josh Allen throwing some interceptions along with 330 yards and 3 touchdowns than what he's done here. That Texans game was a brutal loss with the way it ended. For anyone who hasn't paid attention to the rest of the league, they have the ball inside their own 5-yard line with under a minute to go, and they basically throw deep 3 times and then punt. Texans run 1 play, kick a field goal to win it. So they went from having the ball in less than a minute to go in a tie game to losing. I thought Mike Sander did a good job of explaining why it wasn't as bad as people look at. If they run it up the middle 3 times, they probably still lose. It's just a matter of Houston using timeouts versus not using timeouts. But they were aggressive, which I think Jets fans would embrace that aggressiveness at the end of the game. But anyway, how do you see, big picture, how do you see this game kind of starting? Because this is also Monday night at home against the Bills, which is how last season started. Yeah.
The Jets have done generally pretty well against Buffalo at home. Especially, Josh Allen, they've other than the one game late last season, they've pretty much dominated him. So he doesn't have as explosive of weapons anymore. Stephon Diggs is gone. Gabe Davis is gone. And, they have James Cook, who I think is really good, but their receivers they're kind of like a mishmash of young guys and kind of journeymen like Curtis Samuel. So they don't scare you as much. They have some good tight ends. But the Bills are the team to beat in this division still. Until they lose the division, they are. And if the Jets want to, the Jets can really change the narrative around their season simply with a win. However they get it, a win on Monday, that changes everything. it would have changed it for Saleh too, which is, a conversation to be had, I guess, or maybe not, like keep repeating it, but they win, they're in the not the driver's seat, but they're in the driver's seat to like compete for the playoffs. If they lose, then it's going to be a lot harder to recover from it. Like, it's a very important game. They're going through an emotional week where they change head coaches midweek, change play callers midweek. I'm sure there will be some other changes in the lineup and stuff like that to try and spark something on offense, or at least tendencies in the way they call plays and all that stuff. So I think the Bills are the obvious favorite, and I think the expectation is probably that they win. But the Jets wouldn't be the first team to experience something emotional like they did this week and come out and play well. The Bills defense isn't the same as it used to be. They don't have Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde, and they've lost some guys to injury. So I don't think their defense is that intimidating. They're very well coached on defense. You can criticize Sean McDermott for some decision-making, but not for, I think, his ability to coach a defense. Like, that's a really, really good defensive coach. And, normally he would be matching wits with Nathaniel Hackett, and you think that McDermott's going to win that matchup every time. Maybe you feel a little better about Todd Downing. So it's going to be interesting it's hard to predict this game because we just have no idea how the Jets are going to look. Like, if they come out playing with energy from the beginning, they absolutely can beat the Bills. They have more talent than them. Like, the Jets have more talent than the Bills, but the Bills have the quarterback. So I guess it depends on how you evaluate more talent. You have the most talented guy at the most important position, but the Jets overall have the better roster. So if Rodgers can stay upright and play better than he did the last 2 weeks, which, he was arguably the reason for that loss in London, then they can beat them. But, I just have this is the hardest game to predict maybe since I started covering this team, just because there's just so many factors at play here. And as I saw Boyd Green pointed out, James Cook hasn't practiced yet this week, which is really notable because he's their real threat out of the backfield. He kind of helps their offense tick. And he's on my fantasy teams, 2 of them. So which would be frustrating if he doesn't play. So yeah, it's going to be a tough game. I think the Bills are very motivated coming off a couple of bad games for them. I know Josh Allen knows all the narrative around how the Jets have played well against him. So yeah, it's going to be a really fascinating, and it's Monday Night Football for everybody to see. Everything, Jeff Ulbrich's every decision is going to be, he's a first-time head coach making these big decisions for the first time. He's going to mess up at some point. Curious to see how the fans treat him about it and how he handles it after the fact. I imagine he'll point the finger at himself because I think he's good at that. But I'm even thinking now it's going to be so weird post-game talking to Jeff Ulbrich at the podium. I've only covered Robert Saleh when I've covered the Jets. So it's going to be very surreal, a weird feeling. But I think as we start getting through the season, it'll get more normal for me and for the guys on the team. So, but yeah, the Bills are really good. This is an interesting matchup for the Jets. There's a lot of bad blood there with the Deion Dawkins stuff. He talked a lot of shit about them in the offseason, and he got into a fight with Michael Clemens. And
Clemens in the tunnel last year, yeah.
Yeah, in the tunnel. I was right there. That was a crazy moment. But so, yeah, these games tend to be good for the most part. These teams, I don't think like each other particularly much. It's not quite like the Patriots rivalry or anything like that. But I think the Jets need to win. If they want to be taken seriously, then a win this week would go a long way.
I think there's no question they come out with a ton of energy and emotion just because of this, for however you want to kind of take in the firing, whether you want to play like to prove yourself because like all the eyes are on you now and like the hot seat for everyone, or if Ulbrich inspires these guys more, or if you're just angry at you know what I mean? Like, for whatever reason, I can't see them coming out sluggish in a game 5 or 6 days after the head coach was fired. Like, I can't imagine that happening, but that doesn't mean sometimes that also leads to like stupid mistakes and all that stuff. So that's what I'll be watching, is like, is everything buttoned up better than it has been the last couple of weeks on this team?
Yep. And
we'll see. Anything else, Zach, before we say goodbye?
Well, I guess just to hit the other injuries that we didn't talk about yet. Michael Carter II has a new injury, a back injury. I forget what the one he had last week, and he was dealing with the ankle thing all year. So it's not great that he has all these injuries, and he didn't practice today. Ulbrich, to his credit, and a lot of coaches start off this way and then it dies off right out of the gate. He was like really good with injuries. He was specific about them. He was like giving us like who was probably going to play and who wasn't this week. CJ Mosley is trending toward playing, I think it sounds like, or he's at least progressing in his return. Leki Fotu, it sounds like, will play this week, which should be a boon for the run defense at the very least. So Tyron Smith had a regular rest day. Aaron Rodgers was limited. So Michael Carter being out would not be ideal, but they've survived that with cornerbacks before. So it's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, it's a very interesting game. There are some people still doing the picks pool. I would say make sure you get those picks in if you have. I've gotten better about being consistent about it. I did miss that 1 week, but
exciting news coming for the picks week 2.
That's
next
why I
week.
thought of that.
All around exciting stuff coming for our show next week. So tune back in for that.
So even if you haven't started the picks pool yet, we'll probably be doing something weekly. So make sure you start getting on it now, I would say.
Yes, there'll be reason to get involved. And the season-long competition continues as well. But yeah, exciting stuff coming. So we'll be back on Tuesday to recap the Monday night game against the Bills, and then we'll have our typical episode later in the week as well. Thank you to everybody for tuning in, whether it's on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast. Shout out to the Badlands as well. Badlands, man, feed this week all over this news from, I think within like 2 hours, Joe and Connor were on reacting. More reaction the next day. It's been all week long. Hopefully,
I think I'm going to go on Will Park. I think I'm going to go on Will Parkinson's Turn on the Jets tomorrow. So
nice.
Stay tuned for that.
Hopefully, we're doing our part with some inside the building information here from Zack as well.
And I should say, make sure you guys like and subscribe here if you haven't yet, because the more we get of those, the more fun prizes we might have for you guys. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you again next week.